Welcome to SmallTalk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of SmallTalk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Strum, who is the author of a number of Sfarim and gives Shiurim, Torah Anytime, and so on. This episode of the podcast, we'll be discussing a book that he published titled Karpas, the Big Dipper, Exploring the Depths of a Seder Mystery, with Rabbi Strum. I will mention also that he just published a brand new book, which is titled V'yidgu, the Upstream Jew, exploring the deep connection between fish and the Jewish nation, which perhaps in the future we'll get a chance to do it. For now, we'll do the one on Karpas. So thank you, Rabbi Strum, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay. A book on Karpas? What's going on?
Well, yeah, you probably saw the title, Karpas, the Big Dipper. A lot of people think it's about the celestials, the stars. It's not. It happens to be, I love stars, I love constellations, and Hashem does too, right? We're compared to stars, but the Big Dipper has more to do with dipping, right? The Tibul, there's a lot of dipping more so on this night, Pesach night, than any other time. And I decided, you know what, let's write a book on Karpas. Everyone goes for the underdog, so there's a lot on Magid, and, we talk about Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim and Shulchan Aruch, but underdogs always are like gishmak to focus on. So I decided to write a whole book on Karpas, which I think it might be the underdog of the Seder night.
Yeah, I mean, one of them, I guess, Orchat. There's a couple that are Yachat. Some of them are just the ones that get lumped together in the beginning. You're like, all right, let's go. We got to get to Magi. Let's move through these. We're not spending a lot of time on these.
Correct.
So it's interesting. That's why when I'll tell for the listener, you emailed me about the V'yidgu book. And then I know you mentioned, or I saw that you wrote this one. I said, you know what, let's do a podcast on the Karpas one, because I think that one is very interesting. And I did an episode last year or the year before on Charoises, and that, different type of thing, but also something not so well. It was quite interesting, and I got very good feedback on it. So I was like, wait, Karpas, people don't know it so well. So let's talk about Karpas. Start off right there. And you mentioned the Ramah on Karpas right away in the book and how important Karpas is to some degree.
Yeah. The Ramah, it's actually a fascinating Ramah because you could just read right through it. We know there's a machlokes when it comes to the positioning of the Seder plate. What goes where. There's the Arizal and the Ramah, and there's different opinions. And the Ramah says a line over there. He says, HaKarpas yehet l'mayla min hakol. That Karpas should be above everything else. So that means practically that it should be the very first thing that you're not being mavir ala mitzvahs, because since it's the first thing you're going to encounter, it should be right in front of you. But like anything we do and read as Yidden, we have to read a little bit deeper. And I think there's a panemius there within the words of the Ramah, and that is that Karpas yehi l'mayla min hakol. On some level, Karpas is l'mayla. There's something so lofty and something so spiritually amazing about Karpas that is l'mayla min hakol on some level, above all else. And if we could focus on that and harness it, then we're going to be able to really chap Ryan on the Seder night, perhaps.
The name Karpas, Where's it from?
There's only one time, not everybody knows this, though there's only one time in all of Tanakh where the word Karpas is used. And that's in Megillas Esther, in the first chapter, in the 6th pasuk. It says, Chur, Karpas, Utcheles. And it's talking about completely nothing to do with potatoes, or as we'll see, maybe something else. We'll maybe get to what Karpas is. But it's talking about the decor that Achashverosh had in the palace during the feast. That's where it's brought down.
But then we have the word Karpas here associated with dipping with the Seder. So how did we get there?
Well, already we find a connection, because what does the word chor mean? Chor means, if you look in art scrolls, say like white hangings. But the word chor we know also means chor, like char, like cheros. So we already find a connection in the Megillah, chor Karpas, an association between Karpas and chor and cheros. Not only that, but the next word too, tcheles, is also not just turquoise wool, but it's tachlis. It represents our goal. The goal is to get to a level of freedom, and the medium from chur to cheles, from chur to tachlis, is Karpas. Is this potato.
So you keep saying potato. Let's talk about that. There's something
potato.
Yeah, I think this is somewhat well known when it comes to Karpas, at least to some degree. But you talk about it in the book. I think we should talk about it here. You mentioned potato. I'm sure many listeners use potatoes. There are plenty that don't use potato. So, which vegetable to use? And the fact that Gemara doesn't say which vegetable to use for Karpas.
Yeah. The Gemara makes absolutely no mention. The Gemara in Pesachim, which talks about the Seder, it talks about Yerakos, vegetables. So, okay, very nice, but where does Karpas come in? And what it seems like is that the very first makor for Karpas associated with the Pesach night is it from the Siddur Rav Amram Gon. That seems to be the first one. And a lot of the components that we have today in our Seder is actually from that very siddur. But there, even still, he uses the word karpasa, but he's talking about a whole list of suitable options. So it doesn't just isolate it as just karpas, it's a whole bunch of yerakos. And truth is, when it comes to fulfilling the mitzvah of karpas, you could really do it on any vegetable that you're not using for maror, because we know you make a bracha, right, on Bari Pri Adama, it's covering the maror, you're having in mind the maror, so you could really use any vegetable. The Gemara makes no mention of karpas. The Siddur of Amragon mentions karpas as one option. Where do we find it in terms of where do we actually find it that this should be your go-to option? One of the first makoros is the Rokeach. The Rokeach tells us, V'lekeach karpas, who apia, he says karpas is apia, and then he says yarak, you could take something else. So there he says davka, you really should take karpas, and the Shulchan Aruch codifies that. He says that ideally you should take the karpas.
And it certainly wasn't a potato. They didn't have potatoes. That's an American invention, if you will, not an invention, but a discovery in America. So it wasn't potato, but it became a potato. And you do talk about there are different opinions of what people use.
Yes, very much so. There's two camps. Already in the times of the Gemara talks about apia and what that is. But really, there's two camps. It's either apia as celery or apia as parsley, and the authentic karpas likely was one of those two camps. And there are many poskim that go with the opinion that it was indeed parsley, from the Magen Avram to Taisus Yomtiv, Melech Shlomo, and many others. And then based on the Gemara in the Bavli, in the Ksubis, which says that a woman, the Gemara says that it talks about a woman who eats karpas will have beautiful children. Rashi defines it as celery, and many take that opinion. So it's either parsley or celery. In Europe, the way the way that many people view it is that in Europe, where karpas really they didn't have the celery or the parsley, it wasn't in abundance during the Pesach season, so they went for potatoes. And the minhag established as such, and then it kind of stayed, because we're people all about minhag. And if that was the hashgacha at the time, then there was something about the potato as well. And so it stuck.
Why do we dip?
Why do we dip? It's such an interesting thing. We dip. Truth is, we dip all the time. I mean, I'm not that old, but growing up, right? Shabbos tables, okay, you'd have your salt and maybe oil or something, maybe hummus. But now, there's literally markets out there just for Shabbos dips, and it's incredible hashgacha. The closer we get to the coming of Mashiach, the more and more dipping there is. We look at it as just arbitrary. We're dipping it. You buy tons of dips for Shabbos, but it's not. There's something deeper to it. We're trying to get to someplace. The dipping is something, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe points out dipping, tibul, right? Tibul is the same osios, the same letters as bittul, right? It's I think it's called an anagram, right? It's the same exact letters. When you're mivatal, when you dip something, you're actually mivatal some of its own flavor for that thing. So, for example, like we all like. I could only speak for myself, right? Let's say a French fry dipped in ketchup. So if you like a French fry, very nice. But a French fry dipped in ketchup tastes that much better, even though you're nullifying some of the flavor of the potato for that ketchup. And when we dip, we're actually nullifying. So two things are happening when we dip the karpas. Number one, we're dipping into salt water or vinegar, representing the tears, representing the servitude, representing the hardship and difficulties. But in another way, when you dip, it represents being mivatal ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that yes, it might be in a certain circumstance where it's hard, it's difficult. I'm going through this servitude in Egypt, but still I'm being mivatal myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I know He's taking care of me. So the dipping represents servitude on one hand, and at the same time, it represents an element of freedom, all at the same time, which is fascinating.
Is that the message? What's the message of Karpas?
There's so many messages of Karpas. It's hard to point and say one. The fact that it's like the preemptive, it's, Kiddush, Kaddish, Orchatz, right? We always make Kiddush, we always wash our hands. The first step of the Seder, that's very, very different, even though by Orchatz we don't make a bracha, which is different. But really the first step of the Seder, which is very different, is the fact that we're eating this vegetable, we're dipping first. In fact, the Rashi tells us that the whole point of it is so that the Tinoikas, the children should ask. And the Mishnah Berurah tells us as well. They should see what's going on. They should ask, and then we're going to respond. Avadim hayinu. This is the beginning of the differences. This is the Karpas stage is the beginning where we say, okay, there's something going on here. And you know what? Now the children are going to ask, and we're going to respond. And the message is twofold. Yeah, we could have two experiences. We could be involved in slavery and servitude. At the same time, we could be experiencing freedom, all at the same time. Samach Perech, Karpas, Osios, 60 myriads were suffering in hardship, but we still have hope. We still have anticipation that there's going to be a better day, and we could experience freedom mitoch that difficulty.
What are some stories related to Karpas? So throughout the book, besides for going through halachic aspects of Karpas, what it is, and then the reasons why we dip, and some of the things we've just discussed, and the significance of Karpas, the message of Karpas, and so on, you also have many stories sprinkled throughout.
Yes, I do include some stories throughout. There's one specific story that kind of stands out from the Vorko Rebbe, where somebody had fasted, one of his Talmidim had fasted on Erev Pesach, and then it comes along that night, and he's so hungry, and he ends up eating a whole boatload of potatoes. And we know the halacha is you're supposed to only eat pachas mikazayis from Karpas, but he was so hungry, he fasted the whole Erev Shabbos, so this Talmid ate way more than a kazayis of Karpas. And his Rebbe said, some people are enslaved to Egypt, and some people are enslaved to the potato. And so he was bringing out this lesson that, we can be enslaved to the Gashmias, and that's one of the ideas of Pesach, is to kind of get rid of that and to be able to break free from that servitude. But ultimately, I think the main story of Karpas is us. It's the story of the Jewish people. And that's what I tried to bring throughout that book, is that really Karpas represents our story, the story of Yidden going through the course of history and hopefully coming out on top and living with Chiyas.
So what's the ultimate message or significance of Karpas to us? And when we're doing Karpas by the Seder this year, rather than just mumbling through Karpas and just dipping it in as we're starving, want to eat something, what should people be thinking?
Yeah, Karpas is considered a yerek. It's considered a vegetable. And the tzaddikim point out, when you rearrange the letters of yerek, it's yakar. It's precious. It's something that, right, Karpas is specifically pachos mikazayis. It's specifically something small that's less nikazayis. This is the Jewish people. This is our story. The people who are small, they're like pachos mikazayis. We're ma'at shema'at, right? We're the smallest of all people. Yet on that, specifically because we're small, we're yarek, we're yakar, we're precious. And it's important, I think, for us, when we eat this, specifically that small, and not only that, but a lot of people take a fork and hold the karpas. You shouldn't do that. Really, the Poskim tell us you should use your fingers. You have to have that direct connection with the karpas because it speaks to who we are at our core. Take that little bit, that less than a kazayis of karpas. Realize that this yarek is yakar, is precious, and really it's a calling for each of us that each and every yid is so precious in the eyes of Kadosh Baruch, and we have so much to offer each of us individually.
Who is your book meant for?
The book is meant for anybody who eats karpas. So that's what I would say. If you're a yid and you're at the Pesach Seder eating karpas, it's for you. If you're a seasoned Talmud Chacham, there's a tremendous amount of marmakomus in there. And if you're just somebody who's starting out, I think you'll find meaning and inspiration in here. Men, women, even children, I think, can gain from karpas.
Okay, usually I end off the small talk with what are you trying to accomplish with this book, but I think it's pretty clear the answer to that question, and you can correct me if there's something else to add, which is you're trying to teach people about Karpas and about its significance and its message, which may otherwise be lost as people just, go through the motions and not really think about what Karpas is.
Yes, very, very much so. But I think there's also, you mentioned my book, The Yidgu, and I have another book on Hanukkah about dovetails. And one of my goals with these niche, specific books, I guess, Sfarim, is that really all of Yiddishkeit, the Torah is so immense and it's so vast, so you could take one small component, but if it's part of the Torah, then there's infinity infused within that. So you could take one small part, one little aspect of the Pesach Seder night, the step of Karpas, and in it you could write 100 books and till infinity. There's so much in there. And if Hashem is putting this into our lives, that we have to find the meaning, like Rabbi Nachman says, you have to find the seichel b'chol davar, that there's meaning and intellect in every single thing.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Strum, for joining me. I will link in the show notes. For those interested, you can purchase the book on Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.